if I can get 'em, but I got 'em right now. Hey, I wake up just to get down. I don't know if I can get 'em, but I got 'em right now. Develop these bars for the developing stars, whoa. Ranked by the stars though, but they know just who they are. The knowledge is deep, man, cause college is bleak, man. Knees are the bees, man. Devy happy hour now. I trust him with everything. Every conference giving me confidence. Hipping is hopping and really no stopping. I'll make you a champion. Y'all put a sock in it up. But this is life, bro. They're at it all night, though. So you can just drive slow and get down with the Devy crew. I wake up just to get down. I don't know if I can get 'em, but I got 'em right now. Hey, I wake up just to get down. I don't know if I can get 'em, but I got 'em right now.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are listening, wherever you are listening. This is episode 71 of the Devy Happy Hour. My name is Skip Newton, coming to you from Eagan, Minnesota. It is Monday, May 3rd. The NFL draft is finally in our rearview mirrors. It was an awesome weekend, a lot of fun, but we are here to talk Devy with you because that's what we talk about all the time. Bringing in my co-host from North Carolina, Mr. Matthew Jackson. I call him Obi-Wan. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. We are just a few days removed from the NFL draft. I know we're hashtag Devy all the time on this podcast, but I just wanted to tell you how excited I am that we have added the Slim Reaper to the Eagle squad. Going to bolster that wide receiver core, give us a legitimate wide receiver that I'm actually happy about. We don't have to deal with Jalen Reagor as wide receiver one anymore. I'm ecstatic about that. The only thing that could have made this week better is if you guys would have used the opportunity given to you and traded up and thrown Justin Fields to that Minnesota Vikings squad. I would have been ecstatic.
Yeah, that was not something that I really wanted to hear, after the fact, because, the first round I saw Fields slipping, and I'm thinking, man, who's going to trade up to get Fields? Because I knew there was no way he's just going to fall to 14 to the Minnesota Vikings. And as soon as I saw the Bears' names come on the clock at, I think it was 11. I was like, oh, here it is. This is a lock. It's Justin Fields. It was a great trade up by the Bears. I'm not afraid of the landing spot, by the way. If I have the second pick in a Superflex rookie draft, I'm taking Fields, even though I love the Trey Lance landing spot as well. I mean, I think that is maybe as good of a landing spot as you're going to get for a quarterback. But, I love Fields' talent. I love his attitude. I love his work ethic. And I think maybe, unfortunately, as a Vikings fan, I think maybe the Bears have finally got their much-needed, long-awaited franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and so, I'm a little worried about Matt Nagy for sure. But, I mean, when you look at all of these quarterback landing spots, I mean, they all got, in my opinion, probably the best landing spot for their individual skill set that they could have landed in.
Yeah, it really was interesting how that worked out. It was like all the quarterbacks fell into these landing spots that make us excited, not only as fantasy managers, but as football fans. And then on top of it, or the exact opposite, I should say, the wide receivers, none of them really fell into a spot like in that first round where you got really super pumped about it. It was like, yeah, I could see that working out, but man, I'm not so sure. I mean, obviously, I think we're going to like Jamar Chase in Cincinnati, but I was just sitting there like, dude, you guys need to get an offensive line, man. What are you doing?
I like
two good wide receivers.
I like Penei Sewell in Cincinnati a whole lot more than I like Jamar Chase in Cincinnati. I mean, you're coming off a quarterback. Your franchise quarterback just tore his ACL because you refused to protect his blind side, and you didn't address offensive linemen until the fourth round.
Right. And as a fan of a team who's had offensive line problems for years, I was just shaking my head like, come on, you guys. You got to be smarter than this. You can be better. Before we get into the Devy stuff, I feel like I need to step into the confession box or whatever you call it. I'm admittedly not Catholic. I've never gone to official confession, but I need to confess to you, Mr. Jackson, Reverend Jackson, I did not complete the assigned task you gave me. I did not watch draft day before the draft.
I feel like it's time for me to step into the confessional pool now as well. Now that you've opened up and shared your heart with me, I sat down to try and watch draft day 3 times this week, and every single time I sat down to try and watch it, me and my wife had a discussion about what show we were going to watch, and draft day was never on never on the plate. So I unfortunately did not watch it either. So I'm not going to sit here and be the hypocrite to tell you that, oh, shame on you for not watching draft day, because I as well did not do my assigned task in watching draft day.
Yeah, the difference there is at least you've seen the movie. I've never seen it. And if it makes you feel better, all the guys that I watched in the first round with, when they found out that I hadn't watched draft day, I mean, they gave me relentless crap for it. So that became the thing.
It's a classic
that never
movie,
ended
man. You got seriously, sit down sometime within the next few weeks, whenever you got time, and just watch it. It's a classic NFL movie.
I know, it's crazy. And I'm honestly, somebody said that night, they said, ESPN, 3 or 4 or whatever it is, or the Deuce, they should do what TNT does on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, whichever one, and just play, like, how they play the Christmas Story, 24 hours straight. That's what, one of these channels should do. We're just going to play Draft Day, the movie, over and over again for 24 hours leading up to the NFL draft. So
I tweeted out at some point, it was like Wednesday night or something like that. I forget what time it was, but I was like, if you start draft day right now, you don't have to watch it 13 times for the NFL draft, or something like that. Like, I was so bored, I sat down and did the math because I wanted to watch it so bad.
Yeah, I got to do that. Got to do that before next year. So, all right, let's get into the news, and just wrote down a couple things because it was really interesting. We're talking about the SEC. We're going to get into the SEC East today, and we're going to try to get through all the teams because there's more Devy goodness on the West side. But one of those West teams, Arkansas, 2 wide receivers since the last time we podcasted have transferred. So Mike Woods, a talented wide receiver, transfers to Oklahoma, and Trey Knox, last I heard, is in the transfer portal. I have not heard if he has picked a school, but those are basically wide receivers 2 and 3 on the depth chart. So it's going to be the Treylon Burks show, and whoever can step in to fill that void. That's a significant amount of targets leaving the Arkansas passing game. So that was interesting.
Wheels up on Treylon Burks for sure. And I'm sure we'll talk about this when these guys find a spot when Trey Knox finds a spot that he's landed at. But man, I just moved Treylon Burks to wide receiver 2 in my Devy ranks. But I mean, if he has the season that is looking like he's going to have with all these vacated targets rolling over to him, man, he could be wide receiver 1 by the time this is all said and done. Skip, I'm telling you, I might put him above Garrett Wilson, and I know that's crazy to think because I'm not putting anybody over Garrett Wilson, but Treylon Burks might do it for me.
There you go. I'm feeling better about taking him at the 110 in that C2C startup where he was the first wide receiver off the board, and I grabbed him. All right, the first team we're going to talk about today is Florida, and of course they lost some significant people to the NFL. Kyle Trask, the quarterback, going to the Tampa Bay Bucks. Kadarius Toney, a surprise, well, in my opinion, surprise pick to the New York Giants. Not excited about that wide receiver or that landing spot, to be completely honest. And then Kyle Pitts, the big tight end, number 4 overall to the Atlanta Falcons, gone.
So Kyle Pitts drafted to the Canton Hall of Fame. I think is what
oh
you
yeah,
want to
that's
say.
right. They're already going to enshrine him right now.
Yeah.
He's that good already. Good point. So filling in at quarterback, a couple of guys probably not on anybody's Devy radar, but at least one of these guys I know you want to spend some time on, at least a little bit. We've got Anthony Richardson, who is 2023 eligible, and Emory Jones, who's been on the roster, but not obviously playing quarterback because of Trask. He's eligible next year. Tell us about Richardson, Jones. Which one should people be looking at?
I love a lot about what I see from Emory Jones. Emory Jones, I've been very bullish on him this offseason as somebody that I think is going to come in be my guy, be that guy that comes in and just radically increases his draft stock and his Devy stock. I mean, you look at him; he's got the wheels, he's got the feet to be a mobile Konami code. I know we use that term all the time about running quarterbacks, but he's got that ability to be this Konami code type quarterback. He's got a live arm. He's got some little bit of accuracy issues, but man, when he throws the ball, I mean, it's a snap of the wrist and the ball comes flying out of his hand. So he's got a live arm that he works really well with. If you watched any of Florida last year, yes, you saw it being the Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts show. But if you paid attention, every once in a while, they would sneak Emory Jones into the game, and they would give him a drive, or they'd give him a few snaps, and he looked good while he was doing it. I mean, a lot of these were like QB-type scramble, QB draw-type plays. But, I mean, he was allowed to throw the ball, and from what I've seen in spring practices, he's got an arm that could be interesting in Devy drafts this year. And from what they did last year, getting him into the game, even with Kyle Trask being there and leading the team and having the season he had, Emory Jones was still making noise. He looks to be the guy that's going to come in and get all the chances at that starting rotation. Okay,
so if he can take over that position and do really well, kind of fill that void, but also provide a lot of running, a lot of passing, he could be one of those guys that comes out of nowhere, right? That he's not on anybody's roster because no one's drafting him in Devy, and all of a sudden everyone's going to be talking about Emory Jones next November because he's had a couple of great months. So we'll keep our eyes out on that guy. At running back, we've got three guys, but I think there's probably a definite favorite here. DeMarcus Bowman was a freshman last year, recruited and committed to Clemson, and then transferred very quickly to Florida. Dameon Pierce and Lorenzo Lingard are both 2022 eligible. Neither one of those guys has done enough to get people excited from a Devy perspective, but they're decent talents. But I got to believe that the one that people are keeping their eyes on is got to be DeMarcus Bowman, wouldn't you think?
You would think that, and I think a lot of Devy guys are going to put their bets in DeMarcus Bowman. I mean, he's got that game-breaking speed. He's got that Travis Etienne-like game to his gameplay. We noted that whenever he transferred to Clemson. It felt like they were losing Travis Etienne and getting another Travis Etienne in the same spot. Now that talent's in Florida. He's got the game-breaking speed. He's got the lateral agility. I mean, he's a home run hitter. So you love that. But when you look up who's being raved about in spring practices and who coaches are talking about and who's getting the starting reps, interestingly enough, it's not DeMarcus Bowman. It's Lorenzo Lingard. And a lot of that could just be because he's the older guy on the team. He's got the starting reps previously. DeMarcus Bowman is just learning the offense. He's going to come in and take over. But coaches are raving about the practices that Lorenzo Lingard is putting in these spring practices. So as much as I want to sit here and say, yeah, DeMarcus Bowman's going to be the guy, it could very much be a split committee between Lingard and DeMarcus Bowman before it's all said and done.
Now, that's a great point. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Lorenzo Lingard, he is a top-rated recruit. So in his recruiting class, which was 2018, he was a composite 5-star recruit, the number 2 overall running back in the 24/7 Sports rankings. He was a 4-star, the RB3. So not a huge difference. He just dropped from 25th nationally to 44th. So he's way up there as far as on the recruiting rankings. He's just never put together a season to warrant that, to give people that's why this guy's so highly rated. So I guess in that respect, I'm not surprised if he's the guy that the coaches are seeing. I don't remember where he was before. It might have been Miami. I could be wrong, but he transferred to Florida, I want to say, because I know he was in the ACC, and I think that's right. But my memory's horrible at this stuff, so if people out there, if you're saying, "Oh, it's this school," then that's fine. That's cool. But anyway, I could see Lingard getting the job. I'm not worried about that at all. And maybe we'll see what happens, because I want to see this Bowman kid too. I mean, he's kind of the hot flashy toy. We didn't get to see him last year because he transferred and sat out. So people want to know what's going on.
And I just want to say real quick to that point. We talk about all the time how your best classes, your stud classes, are a 40% hit rate between your freshman classes. I mean, if we're playing the math here, I mean, just simple fact of the matter, Tank Bigsby, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kendall Milton struck a little bit. Zachary Evans had a good end of the season. I mean, you've already got a lot of guys that have broken out this year. If I'm playing the odds, as much as I love DeMarcus Bowman, the odds aren't exactly in his favor, and he's not in a great situation to get the lion's share of the carries either.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like you said, these guys don't always hit, and the percentages aren't in their favor. So yeah, it's possible that DeMarcus Bowman will never reach that full potential. But then a year ago, or even going into this spring training or spring games, we would have thought the same thing about Lorenzo Lingard, and all of a sudden he's at least turning heads a little bit. So you never know. Maybe he'll pop late. Wide receivers, a couple guys we got on the list. Justin Shorter, another highly recruited guy. He's bounced around. 2022 eligible, I believe Penn State was at one point in his career, if I'm correct. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. And then Xavier Henderson, 2023 eligible, so he was a freshman last year. Do either one of these guys strike you as the kind of guy that can finally make a late run and pop? I mean, of course, Henderson was only a freshman, so that it's not like it's too late for him. But do you think Shorter has a chance to finally do something, or do you think it's too late for him?
I'm done trusting Justin Shorter on my Devy roster, Skip. I drafted him early when he was a freshman. He was a highly touted 5-star recruit, and he burned me year one. And I was like, I invested in him again the next year. I was like, okay, maybe it was freshman year thing, so he'll pull it together. Burned me year two. I'm done investing in Justin Shorter. All he ever does, and all he's ever proven to be, is a highly touted recruit that doesn't translate to the field. I do like Xavier Henderson a good bit. He's got the speed to take the top off the defense. He's got really good body control to go up, grab the ball, contort his body, and make some pretty acrobatic, difficult catches. The only thing that's really limiting him is his route tree. He runs a very basic route tree. He ran a very basic route tree coming out of high school, so that's something that he needs to work on. But if he can advance that a little bit, he's got the talent to be an interesting Devy player.
Yeah, and I like the height. The height-speed combination is intriguing. 6'3", and runs a verified 4.55. Coming out of high school, so that's pretty fast for a wide receiver. But you nailed it on the head there. He needs to do more than just run straight down the field and go up high. I mean, he needs to develop the finer points of playing wide receiver and sell people on routes and do sharp cuts and get open and create separation. That's what we want to see, is specifically this fall coming up, so he can take that next step. All right, and then the last guy for Florida, this is one that you added, kind of a Matt Jackson special potentially. I'll admit I know nothing about this kid. He is a incoming freshman at tight end, Nick Elksnis.
I have no idea.
Tell us about Nick and why did you add him to the list?
I cannot tell you how to pronounce his name. What I do know is 3-star recruit, 15 tight end. Doesn't look like on paper he's going to be the guy. That's why are we talking about a 3-star recruit, 15th tight end in this class, right? 6'6", 220. He's a little undersized, but I mean 220 as an incoming freshman is pretty stout. I mean, if he adds any sort of weight to him, I mean he's going to have some good weight and good size to him. I added him though because everything that I've heard coming out of Florida, coming out of the head coach's mouth rather, is Nick Elksnis has been called by the head coach somewhere in between Aaron Hernandez and Kyle Pitts. So at the very least, those are two very good tight end prospects to be compared to. You're going to have to take a wait and see approach from them because tight ends take a while to develop. But give me a share of somebody that's being compared to Aaron Hernandez and Kyle Pitts minus the Hernandez murder, hopefully.
That is lofty praise for an incoming freshman. He was the tight end 17 rated coming into the of this class, so that's not bad. I mean, I remember when we went over the the freshman class last year and we go over like the previous top 10 to 20 tight ends, and maybe one name was a guy that actually made it to the NFL. So the point that I'm making there is that your tight ends in the NFL can come from anywhere. It's not just going to be the top rated guys. So he has that chance. The things that I like about him from what you've mentioned is the height. The 6'5", 6'6". He's already about 220 coming in. Well, he's going to put weight on that frame in college when he gets into the college program. And if the coaches are already raving about him, that's a great start. So I love that as a deep sleeper at tight end. Very well done. Very interesting. All right, let's get into Georgia next. Of course, they lost Jamie Newman at quarterback, and Newman did not have a good draft weekend. I believe he went undrafted, if I'm not mistaken.
He did go undrafted, yes.
My memory could be...
He did indeed
I know
go
he was
undrafted.
super late if he did... What's that?
He did go undrafted because I made a tweet about him.
Oof.
He needs to fire his draft advisor, whoever that was.
To this day, I still wondered why he didn't play this last year. I thought that was a huge mistake. But replacing him, of course, JT Daniels played last season. Could be one of the top quarterbacks in next year's draft. I mean, you've got Sam Howell, you've got Spencer Rattler. Who that third guy is, there's kind of a glut of names, and any one of them could step up and all of a sudden be like, hey, I'm legit. I should be within these other two names as well. JT Daniels is definitely one of those guys. And then they've got an incoming freshman that's turned some heads as well. Brock Vandegrift, fairly highly rated, 2024 eligible. Tell me quick, how do you feel about JT Daniels? Do you think he can be a day one or day two, NFL draft pick? And what do you think about Vandegrift just from the early highlights in the film we've watched?
Yeah, JT Daniels, man, he looks real good. I mean, when you look at the way that offense was playing pre-JT Daniels versus what they did once JT Daniels finally took over the helm, I mean, they became a more balanced attack. They were actually able to open up their passing game, and he showed us all why he was a 5-star recruit before the injury and before Keaton Slovis came in at USC. I mean, he opens that offense up. George Pickens finally looked the part of a wide receiver one, and we haven't seen that in a long time. So, I mean, you love what he did to that offense. Brock Vandegrift, 5-star, number 2 dual threat quarterback in this class. I mean, he's got the wheels. He's got the arm talent. I mean, he looks to be the guy that's going to come in and immediately take over for JT Daniels once JT Daniels takes off for the NFL. So, I mean, I like this quarterback room for a good long time, for sure.
Yeah, Georgia is set up nicely. I think JT Daniels can elevate himself into that top 3 to 5 names if he comes out next year. And then I like Vandegrift a lot. I mean, he's definitely a name that's probably going to step right in his sophomore season for Daniels. So well done by Georgia to set those guys up for a consecutive years of a good passing attack. Running backs, Georgia notorious for kicking out, good names at running back. Zamir White, we talked about him before as one of those surprise names that came back to school. We thought he'd go pro, coming off a couple of knee injuries. James Cook is there. We've got Kendall Milton, last year's freshman, who already is starting to look the part as a top running back. And Lovacia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Carroll, the incoming freshman, so kind of the next guy on the list. Which one, if you're on a Devy startup and you're going to pick one of these guys as the guy that you want on your Devy roster, which one are you shooting for?
So I'm going to give you a pick one and I'm going to give you a sell one. So my pick one is Kendall Milton. I really, really liked what I saw from Kendall Milton last year. At times he came in and he looked like a better running back than Zamir White, their workhorse power back. I mean, he was more agile. He had better feet, better sideline. I mean, better agility, better cutting ability. Just better. Looked like a better fit for that offense. Zamir White is definitely the power back. He's the bruiser. He's going to lower his shoulder and he's going to take you back a few yards. But when it comes to pass catching, he's not exactly going to be the guy that's going to rack up your PPR points. And if I'm looking for a guy that I'm selling, it's definitely Zamir White. I mean, he's still getting that round 2 to round 3 Devy draft capital and startups, and that is just way too rich for me right now. If I can sell him for any part of that kind of draft capital and take somebody that's going right around the same range as him, say, I'm trying to think now. I'm blanking on some of the guys that are going around the same range as him, but any other guy that's
Eric Gray.
Eric Gray, yeah, I would take Eric Gray above Zamir White for sure. I know who's that? Who's the other Oklahoma wide receiver? Marvin Mims is going around around the same time as Zamir White from a lot of these drafts that I'm seeing. I would take him above Zamir White. I mean, if I'm getting any of these guys, I'm trading Zamir White in a heartbeat because his ADP is just way too rich for me.
Yep, I cannot argue with any of that. I've got Kendall Milton significantly higher than Zamir White. I don't know what it is exactly about White. I don't see a guy that's dynamic enough. That not enough of the lateral movement. He just, he's like you said, if he can go straight ahead, he looks really good and he can hit the hole and he's got some power. I'm very nervous about the 2 knee injuries. I mean, that takes its toll on the length of a running back's career, and the running back's career isn't that long to begin with. So, yeah, I'm much higher on Kendall Milton and would rather use my Devy pick to take him over a guy like Zamir White. And the wide receivers, it is a very crowded room, although unfortunately the top guy, also an ACL. We've talked about this before. George Pickens probably out for the season, but still one of the top names at the wide receiver position that is eligible for 2022. Then we've got another 2022 guy, kind of the Robin to Pickens Batman, and Kyrus Jackson. Far lesser known. Nobody really talks about him, but he makes some plays out there. And then 2023, they had this massive class of highly recruited wide receivers: Jermaine Burton, Arian Smith, and Marcus Roseme. Now let's talk about these guys first before I get to the last guy that I want to bring up. Where do you have, which of these wide receivers are you the most excited about?
So as crazy as it sounds, I'm excited in just about at least 3 of these Georgia wide receivers. And I mean, could you imagine a few years ago when you're saying, "Man, I'm excited for 3 Georgia wide receivers," and in the Devy circle? I mean, that sounds so crazy to sit here and say now because you want the Georgia running backs, you never want the Georgia wide receivers. And now I'm sitting here saying, "Yeah, man, give me three of these Georgia wide receivers." I mean, George Pickens is going to be a top recruit or top signee, draftee in the NFL draft next year. Jermaine Burton came on really, really well last season. He had that, what was it, 200-yard game, 300-yard game, something. It was something crazy. And then I really like what I see out of Kyrus Jackson. I mean, the physicality. He just has sure hands. He can go up in a crowded, in a contested catch situation, bring down the ball. He's got really great sideline awareness to just know where he's at, get his feet inbounds. I mean, he's making NFL catches on the sideline in college. Just sure-handed receiver. So if there's a guy probably that I'm taking as an under-the-radar guy, you've already mentioned it, but it's Kyrus Jackson. And I talked a little about him last year when we were doing our weekly breakdowns of college football. I remember telling you, Skip, I said, go watch Kyrus Jackson because he's going to be a guy that you want to keep your eyes on. And every bit of that's proven that he's a guy that's flying under the radar, that's going to be probably a day 2 pick maybe in the NFL that yields value because not a lot of people are talking about him. He's flying under the radar. Well,
and I wonder if he can be kind of like Amari Rodgers was in Clemson. Like, going into last season, we weren't talking about Amari Rodgers. We were talking about Frank Ladson and the higher recruited
Joe Ngata.
Joe Ngata, the higher talented guys, and nobody was talking about Amari Rodgers. And then look what happens. Amari Rodgers ends up becoming the number 1 target this season. He has a really good year. He's clearly the best wide receiver that Clemson had, at least from a production standpoint, and he gets drafted in the 3rd round to the Green Bay Packers. So got the day 2 draft capital, got maybe a really good landing spot, or not, unless, if Aaron Rodgers retires, that would be, or gets traded, that would be unfortunate. be a crying shame if he wasn't on the Packers anymore.
Be a real shame.
Anyway, moving on.
You wouldn't sleep very well at night if he got traded, would you?
Oh God, and that's how our draft day kicked off on Thursday. It was just awesome. It was the best ever. Anyway, so yeah, I mean he could be that guy, and then you've got these other talented guys from last year who all are going to have an opportunity now that Pickens is hurt. Which one is going to step up? We've got Burton, who you said, he's already kind of flashed, so I think he's probably the favorite of the three. Him, Arian Smith, and Marcus Rosemey. But you never know, right? You never know who's gonna be the guy. The sixth guy on this list, the one I haven't mentioned yet, is the one that's the incoming freshman, and this is the one that's getting some interesting comments in the camp and the spring game, and that's Adonai Mitchell, 2024 eligible because he's an incoming freshman. There have been quotes from, I believe it was JT Daniels, saying how this guy is really, really good, and they are loving what they're seeing out of this kid. So interesting that his name gets pulled out. I'm just going to bring up some of my notes on him since I kind of latched on. I grabbed him in a C2C startup. He's a really good athlete for his frame. He comes in about 6'3", 190, and he will go up and get the ball. So you like to see that. You want to see these tall wide receivers, use that height to their advantage. He runs very well after the catch. I mean, more so or better than you would think of a guy that big, and he has good speed. So an interesting athlete. I think one of the quotes was talking about him as a guy that he just never seemed to stop at practice. I mean, he'd get the ball and he's always making plays, and he was really turning heads. So keep your eyes out for Mitchell from Georgia. That's my go-to guy, kind of my sleeper to bring to this podcast today.
I like that whole never stops working. I mean, because that shows you his mentality. I mean, a kid like that just loves football, and he's going to work his butt off to be great. And so, I mean, if you're going to be an alpha wide receiver, you have to have that mentality. So that's interesting. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind for my upcoming the program draft this year and my recruiting.
There you go. I didn't add this to the show sheet, but we probably should mention that Darnell Washington is a tight end for Georgia. He is a physical specimen, to say the least. 6'7.5", and probably well over 250 by now. And highly recruited. He's a 4-star that was last year's class, the number 2 overall athlete in the class, runs a 4.75. So 6'7.5", runs a 4.75. So he could be a great tight end prospect. I know the one time I had friend of the show Felix Sharp on, he made the prediction that he's just going to put on bulk and become a left tackle, because there's a lot more money to make being an offensive lineman than there is playing tight end. And I kind of laughed like you are now, but then I stopped and thought about it, like, hey, that's not unheard of, and it's not a horrible idea. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings starting right tackle right now, Brian O'Neill, has been here for, I think, 2-3 seasons. He was a tight end, and they converted him to tackle like literally his last year of college, and then we drafted him in the second round, and he's been a really good player for us. So it can happen.
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, a really interesting thought that just kind of came out of nowhere. But going into Kentucky, they've got one guy we want to talk about, and this is a transfer from Nebraska, and I'm glad you remembered this because I completely spaced. Wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson.
He was Nebraska's entire offense for their team. I mean, he was used at wide receiver. They had him in the backfield lined up as a running back. I mean, he's got really great agility in open space. I mean, he looks like a running back when he's carrying the ball. So, I mean, when you're taking all of Nebraska's offense and taking it to Kentucky, I mean, he's the guy that you need to watch out for. I mean, from a Devy perspective, he's a great mid-round grab. I'm not sure how excited I am about him for his NFL prospects. I mean, he's on the small side, doesn't do anything exceptional. But he was Nebraska's whole offense, so it's at least worth noting.
Yeah, and I've been the same way. I've never been super excited about him as a Devy prospect because he's sitting there at 5'8", 175 pounds. He was an all-purpose back, hybrid running back wide receiver, extremely athletic, very elusive, quick, and shifty. He's a playmaker, but you just never know. Are those guys going to get drafted, highly in the NFL, or are they going to fall down and become one of those, late day 3 undrafted guys that pretty much disappear from everyone's radar?
I mean, look, if Tutu Atwell can get drafted in the NFL in the second round at 150 pounds, then anybody should be able to.
How about that? Man, that came out of nowhere. And he's lightning fast, but yeah, I did not see that coming. All right, let's get over to Missouri. Also just one guy, Mookie Cooper. Tell us about Mookie Cooper.
Yeah, Mookie Cooper, transfer from The Ohio State University. I mean, we talk about how loaded that wide receiver room was with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, everybody else. I mean, I could sit here and name all the playmakers that they have on that offense. But Skip doesn't come to a podcast with me to hear me talk about Ohio State. So
that's right.
So, yeah, Mookie Cooper. I mean, somebody had to transfer, and it was Mookie Cooper. And I think he's going to fit in really well with Missouri. I mean, he runs really solid routes. He's a sure-handed pass catcher. He's really physical. I mean, he can go up and, if you're going to cover this kid, pack your lunch money type of deal. I mean, he's super, super physical kid. He's somebody that I think, we're not talking, there's nobody else on Missouri that's going to eat into his target shares. I mean, he's a former 4-star recruit. He's instantly the best wide receiver on the roster. And I think when you're looking at somebody that's going to be a target hog for this team, Mookie Cooper is going to be the guy that does it. Because, he's got the size, he's got the athletic ability, he's got the route running. He's everything that you want in your star wide receiver, and there's no one else to compete with him.
Yeah, I like the opportunity. I like the athleticism. He's got a verified 4.49, so that's fast coming out of high school. My notes are that he might end up being more of a gadget, kind of those hybrid special kind of players like that than he is a true wide receiver. But we'll wait and see how that works out. But I also noted the acceleration and athleticism on this kid is legit. He is very athletic. So that could be something that people should keep an eye on. All right, next team. We're down to 3 teams left. South Carolina. Who do you think is going to be the quarterback? I made a note here, 2023 high prospect Luke Doty. Is he the guy in South Carolina to be the one that we should be looking at from a Devy perspective?
Yeah, I think he is. He's definitely the guy that I think is going to come in and get those reps. So there's nobody else on that roster that really excites me the way Doty did when he came in to South Carolina. He's got the wheels, but he's a really smart passer. He's accurate. He throws a pretty decent ball. So he's somebody that's real interesting for me to come in and kind of take that, who's the next man after DJ Uyunglele and Bryce Young? Who's that next guy that's going to be in this class? And Luke Doty is going to at least get the reps to show that, hey, it could possibly be me.
Yep. He got into a few games last year. Didn't throw the ball a ton, but 60%, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a very low average per attempt. So we want to see more from that, obviously. But at least he got his feet wet in the league, so he's not starting completely cold turkey there. Next, the running backs, and this is where we'll find probably more of our Devy fantasy goodness. We've got 2022 eligible guy Kevin Harris, a guy that is moving up Devy lists as I speak, and Marshawn Lloyd, 2023 eligible. He was the big recruit last year and then tore his ACL, missed the entire season. So now he's coming back. I like both of these guys, and I think they could both end up developing into, good NFL players, if not, at least get you the high draft capital you're looking for. Am I higher on either one of these guys than you are?
So I've been very blatant about the fact that I am not a Kevin Harris fan. And none of that is because of Kevin Harris. He looked great last year. He was a great running back. I liked a lot of things that he did. The reason that he was on the field was because Marshawn Lloyd tore his ACL and was not on the field. I mean, when you look at Marshawn Lloyd, man, I am very, very much high on him coming in and taking back what was rightfully his. I mean, you're talking about a kid that just has crazy work ethic. In high school, he drove a long distance, got up early in the morning, drove a good distance just to get to school, early practices. I mean, he's a very hard worker. They're highly touted recruit, great agility, great speed. He's got some power to him, man, and can he break some tackles? So I was really excited about Marshawn Lloyd when he came to South Carolina, and he was one injury away from he was going to be the guy that we were talking about, not Kevin Harris. So can they coexist? Yeah, probably. But I'm set. If I have any Kevin Harris, which I don't, but if I had any Kevin Harris, I'm selling Kevin Harris because I think and I believe in my heart that Marshawn Lloyd is going to come back and take the position that was rightfully his to begin with.
I do have Marshawn Lloyd rated a little bit higher. I have Kevin Harris, pretty high up. He's just a 3-star recruit, but my notes on him is that he plays pretty fast for his size. I do like guys that are big enough to take on defenders. He's 5'11", 229, according to my database here, and I like how he hits the hole hard. He's kind of a one cut and go. He's a strong runner. He's not going to lose a ton of speed cutting, but he's not that shifty, elusive guy either. I mean, it's pretty much the one cut straight ahead and pretty good vision. He'll find that hole. Whereas you indicated, and I agree 100%, Marshawn Lloyd is more of the maybe this kid could develop into a star. I mean, really good speed, strong runner, quick cutting. I love how he stays low and he's really hard to bring down. I mean, and he hits that hole quickly. So a couple of really good running back prospects there to consider for your Devy rosters. And then one wide receiver, he's a former 4-star wide receiver recruit, Rico Powers Jr. What do you think about Rico? Is this any interest at all in this guy?
Not particularly. I mean, the only reason that I wanted to bring him up was because he is the younger guy on the roster, a former 4-star recruit. They've got a grad transfer and a senior on the roster. This is not a wide receiver room that I'm remotely excited in when it comes to a Devy perspective, but it is at least noting that Rico Powers was a former highly rated recruit. So maybe he turns into something. I'm taking the wait and see approach and very much more interested in the running backs than this room than I am any other position.
Agreed 100%. All right, let's get to Tennessee. There was a lot going on in Tennessee in the offseason. A lot of people left. Eric Gray is probably the big name that went into the transfer portal and picked another school. Harrison Bailey remains as probably the highest rated prospect that I can, that I've got notes on. And I'm hoping he gets the job because I really liked his film from a year ago, and I want to see him develop, or at least get the opportunity to develop. What do you think about Bailey, and is there anyone else on Tennessee right now that's striking your fancy, or is this kind of a wait-and-see approach for the whole team?
No, this team is the story of Tennessee is more about who's not on the roster than who is on the roster. I mean, they lost a ton of talent. They still keep Harrison Bailey, and he made some freshman mistakes. I mean, we all remember that game he came in, and that first drive, he was like 4 for 4 for 60 yards and a touchdown. I mean, just looked phenomenal, dissecting the defense, making the correct reads, showed the arm talent. I know Brandon Lejeune is really big on Harrison Bailey. He was a top-rated quarterback in his Devy dashboard rankings. So he was really excited about Harrison Bailey, as were a lot of Devy folks. And he looked the part. He made some freshman mistakes that he'll grow. Look, these are young kids. They're learning to process a faster speed of college football. He's going to grow. He's going to be a solid prospect. He's got the arm talent to do this. Problem is, he's got nobody to throw the ball to. And I mean absolutely nobody that I'm remotely interested in to throw the ball. He's going to have to transfer, don't you think? Just to get somewhere where he's going to improve his stock and show NFL, okay, look, this is what I can do if you provide me with some talent.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution there is. I sure wish when you hear about all these wide receivers that, you either got like a team like, Ohio State with too many wide receivers that are highly rated, or these other schools, like Arkansas has 2 guys transfer. I wish these guys would look at a team like Tennessee and say, hey, they've got a young quarterback that needs someone to throw the ball to, and they've got a ton of availability. Like, I could go there and immediately be the guy. Then why don't they just do that. It's frustrating because I want these guys to have opportunities that are good. And
you got to think a lot of it's competitive streak. I mean, these guys want to go to a place that's a crowded room and be the guy that excels. I mean, if you were an athlete anytime in your high school, college, whatever, you know about the competitive fire and wanting to be the guy. So I mean, I can get it. For their NFL prospects, it might not be the best decision, but I can understand it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's tough, and of course, I also want to believe that they're choosing these schools for the school aspect as well, and not just the football side. But that's a discussion for another time. All right, the last team is Vanderbilt. Remon Davis is there now. I'm not super thrilled with running back Remon Davis, but he's a guy. He's a guy that some people like. I'm just not that high on him. Where do you have Remon Davis? Is he a Devy asset in your opinion?
I gotta say, Skip, I wouldn't be bashing Remon Davis on our podcast, man, because I was just in talks with Remon Davis's father on Twitter a couple weeks ago, talking about the possibility of him joining into our show. So I don't know. He's gonna have to. You're gonna have to fix some of that before it's all said and done. If we can get him on the show, but man, I like Remon Davis. He's not somebody that I think is super. That's a super highly touted prospect coming into the NFL, but he's somebody that he looked good he was at Temple, right? Looked good at that school.
Yeah, it sounds right.
Sounds right. Yeah, I think he was at Temple.
I rely on you for this sort of stuff, man.
Our listeners are going to listen to us and be like, they have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah, before he transferred to Vanderbilt, I believe he was at Temple. And yeah, I mean, he was the powerhouse to their offense. I like him to come in and at least make some noise in Vanderbilt. But yeah, when it comes to Devy and NFL prospects, he's not a guy that's super, super high on my radar.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, just to kind of wrap up, because we're done with the SEC, and you gotta remember the whole point in Devy is you want to find guys that have the highest likelihood of getting onto an NFL roster, and either obviously being good because you want fantasy production. I mean, that's the whole point, or at least get high enough draft capital where they have value and you can do something with them. Look at this last draft was a huge one. I mean, we had 4 running backs drafted in the first 3 rounds. I mean, talk about, immediately losing value across the board. I mean, some of the top names, even, like the sleepers that people were like, hey, if these guys could get a chance, they could be something. And every analyst is going to give you a different guy, but, Jamar Jefferson and Kylan Hill and, insert, player name here, even Philadelphia's guy. I mean, everybody loved Kenneth Gainwell. He fell to the 5th round. I mean, yeah, he could get a shot, but he's still a 5th round running back. I mean, that's tough. And these other 2 guys I mentioned, they both 7th round running backs. I mean, so, you really want to find those guys that are going to hit as far as, that are going to be attractive to NFL teams. And you just got to be careful how deep you go. I mean, Jarrett Patterson was, one of the most productive college running backs last season.
Undrafted.
Anywhere, and undrafted. I mean, Washington picked him up, so I think it was Washington. But yeah. Man, and then the wide receivers too. I mean, some of the guys, remember how high a year ago we were on Tamorrion Terry, and he goes undrafted. I mean, that's just crazy to me. So you never know with Devy, and that was the kind of my final thought that I wanted to throw out there, is that you can't just assume that those Devy players are all going to end up being really good players on your fantasy roster. And doesn't mean that you trade all your Devy picks and don't get anybody, because you always want to find the stud, but just be aware that the hit rates aren't always what you think they are, and it can be a fun struggle, but it is a fun struggle. So I love it. Matt, what are your final thoughts before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, man, it was good to be back with you. Love getting to talk this Devy football game with you. I mean, it's just a game, so I think it's important to know. I mean, this is all best guess. We're trying to predict success, and we're not always right. We're right sometimes, but we're wrong sometimes. So, I mean, it's all just a game. We do it for fun. And, keep an eye on some of these guys we talked about, because I think there's some real shots at production here. If they don't produce and you grabbed them, well, you can fight me on Twitter. You can body me up. You can get into a league with me and body me up on Twitter, and hope and show me what you think about it. You like that, Skip?
That was awesome. All right, next week we are going to get into the Big Ten. We'll start with the Big Ten East. So get into my conference and go through the Big Ten. It should be exciting. We're not going to start with your side yet. Don't worry. We'll get to Ohio State.
I see what you did there. I know what you're doing.
I'm going to make you wait. You're going to have to be patient. Make you get through these other teams first, and then we'll get to the big ones. So, of course, we are missing Shaq. I'm hoping that when school ends, he can get back on. He's at Dynasty Tools on Twitter. Does some stuff for Dynasty Nerds. Love to have him back. And I am Skip Newton at SkipNewton31. I do some writing on the Devy team for the NFLDraftBible.com, powered by Fan Nation on Sports Illustrated. Obviously, this last few days was crazy busy because we've got everything on NFL Draft, all players in position, etc. We've also got updated Dynasty rankings out there, and we're working on Devy rankings. We'll get those out in the next week. And my next article will be in the top 10 Devy players. So we're going to start getting into fantasy more now that the NFL Draft is finally past us. Matt, where can everyone find you, and what are you working on right now?
So you guys can find me on Twitter at DevyMatt. My rankings are up on Dynasty Nerds. We recently us and the Devy team released a 3-round instant reaction mock draft for all you guys that are having rookie draft starting up either late tonight, tomorrow sometime. I know I've got a few starting up tomorrow, so check that out. Look at some of our writings on these guys, where we think they should be going, and utilize that for your Devy drafts. I've also started doing some Devy prospect profiles. Got a Tech Bigsby out there. I'm going to start working on hopefully getting a Jahmyr Gibbs or maybe Marshawn Lloyd. I don't know. We'll decide where we're going next. But yeah, check out those Devy prospect profiles as I release them.
Awesome. Sounds great. And of course, we are part of the Dynasty Happy Hour team of podcasts. Dynasty Happy Hour every Sunday night with Tim Keller, Doug Eddy, and Tyler Gunther. Of course, they covered the NFL Draft in yesterday's podcast. Randall Memphis Young also occasionally will host the DHH Contractor. So if you're interested in joining that on the podcast, reach out to him on Twitter at DWZMemphis. Want to give a big shout out to my guy Matt Hicks from NFL Draft Bible. We did 5 hours of live streaming for the NFL Draft on Thursday and Friday afternoons. It was a ton of fun. I was glad that he asked me to join, so that was fabulous. I'm hoping this will be an every year occurrence for the NFL Draft. It was definitely worth taking off some time at work to get on there during the day. And to all of you listeners, thank you for listening. If you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. If you want us to talk about anything specific, you have any trades, let us know, and we'll go over it right here on the show. In the meantime, have a awesome week. Enjoy your rookie drafts, and as always, be a good human.